Hello and welcome to another episode of Auspol Explained, where I explain everything to do with Australian politics. My name's David, your wonderful curly-haired host, and today I will be interviewing an independent candidate via Zoom. Today we're going to be going over all sorts of things about being independent, from how does one campaign to what is the reason for being an independent instead of joining a party. Hello and welcome to the show.
Hello, thank you for having me.
For our audience, could you please quickly introduce yourself and also a brief physical description for accessibility purposes?
My name is Georgia Steele. I am running as an independent candidate in the upcoming federal election for the seat of Hughes. I am 170 centimetres tall. I have brown hair, brown eyes, and I'm wearing the brightest orange lipstick I could find.
So, you're running as an independent. Could you explain what that means?
I'm running as an independent, which is a very simple concept. It means me, Georgia Steele, the individual, is going to nominate to run in a federal election. It's really as simple as that. I have no party affiliations whatsoever. I'm doing it really as an individual.
So, why are you running as an independent instead of as part of another party?
There are some huge benefits to running as an independent, and there are some significant downsides as well. If we start with the benefits, because I obviously thought that they outweighed the negatives, running as an independent means that you can run on and campaign for exactly the issues that you care about. No one is telling you what your policies are. No one is telling you how you have to message those policies to a particular audience. You really are in control of your own campaign. I have no, donors breathing down my neck, wanting me to take on a particular issue. I don't have party bosses. I don't have lobbyists at me all the time. I am the boss, really. But another critical reason that I decided to run as an independent is because, it's related to what I just said, but I think that independents have an opportunity in the way that party politicians don't, to really and truly represent their own communities. So the system that we have in Australia sees every member of the House of Representatives representing a geographical area with approximately 100,000 voters in it. When you're a party politician, you are towing a party line on various issues, and when you're an independent, you're not. The only people who you have to answer to are the people that you represent, the voters. So I am really attracted to the idea of properly representing my community and nobody else.
How do you overcome things like, a lack of party funds or a lack of, prior policy commitments that parties have and that name recognition that parties have?
Look, I want to say that it just means that you have to work a lot harder for a lot longer in your community. You're right. It's resources that you don't have. It's also know-how that you don't have. If you picture me, for example, joining one of the party branches in my electorate of Hughes, I would have access to people who've done this before. I might have political mentors who are around. I would certainly have access to advice galore on what you need for a federal election campaign and how to go about getting it. When you run as an independent, you don't have that. So you have to prepare yourself very well. And there are ways to prepare yourself for anything in the same way you would for anything that you haven't done before. You read, you talk to people, you get capable people around you helping you. And if you start early enough and work hard enough, then you can get there.
Fair enough. Some people watching or listening are possibly interested in running for politics, maybe even independent for themselves. So what are some tactics that you've come up with for, figuring out how to campaign?
If you're going to run as an independent, it really is helpful to actually, be an active member of your community before you even start thinking about running in the federal election. And that's something that I had been for many years before it occurred to me to run for federal politics. I think sometimes in our everyday lives now, we're so incredibly busy, especially people my age, where they're right in the middle of their careers. They might also be raising small children. And it really does get quite difficult to take an active role in your own community. But I think that if there are people out there who are considering getting into politics, particularly as an independent, a really great first step is just to join a few community groups. You know, you really need to be involved. You need to understand properly how your community works at a real grassroots level. That's where you will build your networks, and it's where you will learn about what the community needs. So I would start with that.
How do you fund a campaign?
In any number of ways. So parties try and get donations from mostly corporations, lobby groups, including fossil fuel and mining companies, for example. Again, don't get me started on that. Community independents generally try and fundraise from their community, just small dollar community donations. I've been lucky enough to get a lot of that. And I've also had some support from people who are in the tech industry who are interested in making sure that Craig Kelly is never a member of parliament again, and who have decided to support my campaign. So again, they're individuals from inside and outside Hughes who have donated very kindly to my campaign. So you get donations from wherever you seek them, and then depending on how successful you are in seeking those donations, so long as they comply with the electoral rules, that you just take it from there. But fundraising is not an easy thing to do, especially for independents and people who have never been involved in politics before, as I haven't, and I've never been involved in fundraising before. So there's a lot of new skills to learn.
What are you spending it on? What is more effective? Like newspaper ads, online advertising.
It's interesting, isn't it? I don't think that a lot of people understand how an election campaign works, and why should they? They've never probably been involved in one before, let alone run one. And so it is a bit of a mystery why money is necessary for election campaigns and what it gets spent on. One of the things I'm trying to do in my campaign is be as transparent as possible about that, both about where the money is coming from and how the money is being spent. So in response to your question about how the money is being spent, obviously the thing that people would understand is that there needs to be advertising. Here in Hughes, I'm actually up against the leader of the United Australia Party, Craig Kelly MP, and he is out there boasting about the unlimited resources that he has. And so, I'm up against big, big money. So we will never be able to compete with the funds that our opponents have, and so we have to compete in another way, and it is by being smarter with our resources, using them better, adapting, changing strategies as you go along once you learn what works and what doesn't. But advertising is a big thing that you spend money on. That involves, as you've said, a variety of different mediums. It could be traditional print media, putting ads in your local newspaper, or if you are lucky enough to have the money, in a national newspaper. Billboards, the street signs that you see around town, maybe on the side of telephone boxes. Then there is money that needs to be spent on things like flyers. I'm actually this close to finishing having dropped a flyer in the letterbox of every single residence in my electorate. So that should reach 100,000 voters. Now, that takes an enormous amount of effort by a group of volunteers, but also it costs a lot of money to print those flyers up. Events cost money, venue hire, food, T-shirts for your volunteers. I could talk about it all day, because there are a lot of things that you have to spend money on. And as an independent, as I said, you have to be very, very careful with how you spend your money. One of the things that you mentioned was social media advertising as well. What kind of split do you spend on advertising between that and more traditional media? The thing about social media advertising, which is so different to any other kind, is that it's so beautifully measurable. So if you're running Facebook ads or some other kind of social media ads, you get instant data about them, which you don't when you put an ad in the paper. So that is one of the ways that we're learning how the advertising works, how effective it is, whether or not we're getting to all the communities that we need to get to, etc. But it's a really, really useful way to understand whether or not your message is getting through properly and whether you're reaching the people that you need to reach, and then being able to tweak your strategy accordingly.
If you did want to hire a billboard with you like thumbsing up, like vote for me, how much does that cost?
Good question. Depending on where it is and how long you want to hire the billboard for, how often your image will appear on the screen, it could be $10,000, $20,000.
You mentioned on top of money that you also have a bunch of volunteers that are helping you distribute flyers. How much do you heavily rely on volunteers, and how helpful are they to a campaign?
Volunteers are essential to the campaign of anyone who's running for office, but in particular, community independents. Every hour that a volunteer gives you is either an hour that you don't have to spend money on, or more likely, an hour of something that you otherwise wouldn't be able to do because time is finite and I can only be in so many places at once. So the campaign honestly wouldn't have the legs that it currently has, and won't ultimately be successful other than with a very large group of dedicated volunteers.
Would you say that there is also like a better connection with a human element versus the advertising?
Absolutely. I mean, advertising, we've spoken a bit about that, but it's only one part of the campaign, right? Like, not even necessarily the most important part. If you can have a large group of volunteers, the benefits are enormous. So you are literally reaching more of your community with every volunteer that comes on board. It is more fun. So like anything, if you have a big team of committed, dedicated people who are all working towards the same cause, it's really fun. It's a really, really great thing to do. Volunteers from your community are also critical, because if they are supportive of you, your policies, your campaign, they will go out and, tell 5-10 people about it. So there's a real multiplier effect of having a lot of dedicated volunteers on your campaign. And then there's just seriously the amount of things to do. It's incredible. Volunteers help with every single aspect of my campaign. I can't think of one thing that doesn't involve volunteer time. So there is letterboxing. That's kind of the most obvious way that volunteers can get involved. But then there are community events, once a week sometimes, and all of those events are being run, managed, staffed by volunteers. I have volunteers out in the community wearing Georgia Steele orange, just to, be walking billboards for the campaign. Volunteers who help me with social media. Volunteers who will come along to a community picnic I might be running and cook the sausages, cook the democracy sausages. And then, when it gets closer to crunch time, election time, there'll no doubt be a long pre-poll period, and I will have volunteers standing at polling booths, hundreds of them. I mean, hundreds of them for weeks, standing at polling booths, handing out how to vote cards, and just answering the questions of the voters as they walk into the polling booths. So it's, I can't undersell the importance of volunteers to a community independent political campaign.
Fair enough. So for all those watching or listening, get involved and volunteer.
There is such a wide variety of things that you can do. You can do things which don't involve any contact with the public, if that's not your bag. So letterbox dropping, for example, that is just a great way to get some exercise and, walk the streets of a neighborhood that you may never have walked before. And then it goes from there, to everything, including being a spokesperson for the campaign, if that's the kind of thing that you like to do. You could help with social media. You could help with the website. You could help with the books if you're an accountant. There is a role that everybody can help with, and everybody who has both differing levels of interest in or understanding of politics. You don't have to be a political animal to be a volunteer on a community campaign. You can just roll your sleeves up and get involved in so many different ways.
So there's, the external media that you're trying to get the attention of, but there's also the media that you create. And when I asked people, what would you like to know about a campaign? They were like, how much media releases are by the actual candidate and how much is contributed to by a team?
Yep, really good question. So media releases in my case are largely written by the media advisor that I was talking about before. In the early days, I might write it in combination with her. I certainly, you won't be surprised to hear, approve everything before it goes out. But media releases are not very common because you have to have that yarn, I suppose. We wrote a media release when I launched my campaign, for example. We might do a media release on a particularly important day in the Australian calendar because it's an issue that I care about and I want to make a statement about it. But media, for the most part, is trying to get interviews with journalists. And then, of course, social media. Social media takes up an enormous amount of time.
Are you writing all your tweets, basically?
Yeah, I don't let anyone touch Twitter. That's my special place. My tweets are 100% my own. Instagram, I do get quite a bit of help with. I'd say it's probably 50-50 in terms of whether I write that content or whether someone else writes it and I approve it. Facebook, I probably do 75, maybe more, maybe 90% of my Facebook posting is myself doing it. But that will also change as the election campaign moves on and as we get closer to an election, because I will just be out in the community, 20 hours a day talking to people. But I will never let anyone touch my Twitter.
So, like I said earlier, some people tuning in might be interested in becoming candidates themselves. So what is the actual, dull, mechanical paperwork process of that? You have to register with the AEC.
Putting your name down as a candidate in a federal election itself, if you just focus on that specific task, really isn't a huge job. The writs for the election are issued once the Prime Minister goes to see the Governor-General to call an election, and you then have a certain amount of time by which to nominate with the Australian Electoral Commission. And when you're an independent candidate, nominating involves filling out a form, obviously, but also you have to submit signatures from 100 electors in your electorate who know you and who are willing to give their name, address, and sign a form saying that you are in fact who you say you are and they know you and that you are from the electorate and all of those kinds of things. So there's a little bit of admin there, but it's not tricky. It's just time consuming. And you can't, one of the difficulties is that you can't prepare for that. You can only start doing that once the election is called. So there's a time critical aspect to it. But the administrative aspects of running a federal election campaign, the harder part of it is in relation to funding and disclosure. So there are requirements that you have to meet with the AEC in relation to disclosing where your donations come from, disclosing, the names and addresses of donors when donations are above a particular amount. And then you have to disclose your electoral expenditure. So it's a real bookkeeping exercise to make sure that you have all your records quite tight so that when time comes to inform the AEC of all of that, you have it ready to give to them. And in that sense, again, it's a little bit like running the books of a small business, I suppose. Very different compliance requirements, but that's how I think of it anyway.
You haven't actually filled out that paperwork yet.
I have not.
You are a candidate in the sense that you have to let the public know who you are, and
Yes.
that takes time. And so when that election is called, that's when you're like, time to fill in this form.
Yes, and it's funny, isn't it, as an independent candidate, because if you were running as a party politician, there are other formalities that you would have gone through by the time you get to the point of announcing that you're the candidate for a particular seat. For starters, you'd have to be a member of a political party, and then you'd have to run through the pre-selection process. So there would be more formalities just from the party point of view. But to be an actual candidate in a federal election itself, there aren't a huge number of steps that you have to go through. But there is one other really important thing that I'll mention, and that's that people will recall several years ago there was a constitutional crisis really in relation to people's eligibility to sit in the Australian Parliament. There's a section 44 of the Constitution which sets out eligibility requirements, and a lot of senators and members of the House of Representatives had not ensured that they met those eligibility requirements before they were elected, and they had to resign. So it's of critical importance that before you choose to run in an election campaign, that you satisfy yourself, and that can be with the benefit of legal advice if you need it, because it's not straightforward, that you're eligible.
Is there a cost to registering as a candidate?
As a matter of fact, there is. It costs $2,000 to register as a candidate in a federal election.
So you can't just do it willy-nilly as a joke?
Nope, not unless you're happy for it to be an expensive joke.
Do you have any campaign tips for any budding politicians out there?
I think we've spoken a lot about elements of a campaign, but in terms of getting yourself prepared to actually run a campaign or run for federal office, there are a lot of things you can do, especially when you're running as an independent. You don't have the benefit of all the party resources that we've been talking about. There are a number of courses that you can do around the place, both at a national level and a state level. There's an organisation, for example, called Women for Election Australia, and they run really great courses in a whole lot of areas like media training, on the campaign trail, fundraising, those kinds of things that you need to know in order to run for an election. I also last year participated in a course at the University of New South Wales called Pathway to Politics for Women, which did exactly the same thing. It was a really in-depth, take you through your paces kind of preparation to run a political campaign. Now, those two examples have been specifically for women, but there are a lot of other places where you can get the education that you need to feel prepared to run an election campaign. And there's just reading, there's books available that can help you prepare. So like anything I would say in life, prepare yourself, learn as much as you can about it before you agree to embark on it, because the more prepared you are, the better the job that you will do.
So, as you said, you are running in Hughes, so only people in the New South Wales electorate for Hughes can vote for you, but there are going to be many, many independents running all around the country. So how can people learn more about the independents in their area?
Very easy answer. Make sure you know what your federal electorate is called. A lot of people don't know which federal electorate they're in until they turn up at the voting booth. So I'm in Hughes. I'm next door to Cook, which is the Prime Minister's electorate. I'm next door to Banks. I have a number of electorates around me. But find out the name of your federal electorate if you don't already know it. And then Google Independent for Cowper, Independent for Nichols, Independent for Pierce over in WA. And you should be directed to their websites. Most independents will have websites that set out lots of information about them, about their platforms, and information about the election.
Wonderful. Thank you so much.
You're welcome.
And there you have it. Thank you so much for tuning in. And also thank you for Georgia Steele for joining us on the show. And I encourage you, when an election is called and nominations close, for you to look up all the different candidates in your area. Comment down below what you would like to learn about next, share, subscribe, all those things, and I will see you next time.